Navia is the best character in the entire goddamn game. After 2 years of Hoyoverse consistently cucking us and not releasing a single Geo character, Navia has finally come along to change that. Today, I'm going to be showing you everything. How to play Navia, her best artifacts, her best weapons, her best teams, but also some budget options if you don't have the best options that are available to her. Navia is a very flexible unit, if you know what I mean, and she can actually serve a variety of different roles. She can be your main DPS, sub DPS, or even play a supportive role by giving her the Archaic Petra artifact set. But depending on what role you decide to put her in, your mileage may vary. Honestly, I think that Navia does way too much damage to simply slot her in for utility. You better respect our Geo Queen. I was out here hitting 170k elemental skills with level 1 talents.
Damn! I'm sorry.
I think that she performs best in a damage role, so that is what I will be focusing on in this video. First, let's go over artifacts. These are the most important thing in Genshin Impact, and yet they are the only part of your build that isn't guaranteed. Thank you for that, Hoyoverse. Really stellar game design. The best in-slot artifacts for Navia in the most situations is obviously going to be the artifact set that was made for her, a 4-piece Nighttime Whispers. This set gives you 50% Geo damage bonus after you proc the effect, and the 2-piece gives you an 18% attack bonus, which is a good amount of stats. The problem is that this artifact domain is kind of a resin black hole. This artifact set is currently only good for Navia and Ningguang, so farm at your own risk. Now, another great option for Navia would be a 4-piece Golden Troop. This artifact domain is infinitely more resin efficient to farm for. Honestly, the Golden Troop domain is the new emblem domain. I will be spending the next year in this domain. This set gives you an outlandish amount of elemental skill damage, and luckily that is your main damage source with Navia. Unfortunately, you lose the second part of the 4-piece effect bonus after Navia has been on field for more than 2 seconds, but it's still a very good set for Navia. Another artifact set that you can run is the Marashose Hunter, but only run this set if you are using Farina in your team so that you can proc the 4-piece effect. If you are running Navia and Farina together, this actually becomes Navia's best artifact set. Getting 36% extra crit rate just because you have Farina on your team is pretty insane. If you don't happen to have any of these artifacts farmed yet, which is likely because Hoyoverse loves dishing out terrible artifacts, then a 2-piece combination of any of these artifacts on screen can work until you get a full 4-piece set. You can use Golden Troop, any plus 18 attack percent artifact, or a 2-piece Archaic Petra, or a 2-piece Nighttime Whisper. Next, we are going to be covering weapons. Unfortunately, since she's a Claymore user, she doesn't have a ton of amazing options, because for some reason, they don't really like making universally good Claymores. I don't get it. But we will start with the obvious choice, her signature weapon, Verdict. The Verdict is amazing. It is an insane stat stick that increases attack by 20% when party members obtain elemental shards from crystallized reactions, which will always be happening, and it can increase your elemental skill damage by up to 36%. Now, of course, you don't need to roll for her 5-star weapon, but her signature weapon is an axe, which is super badass. I rolled for her weapon just because I wanted it, but something that is basically even with Verdict is an R5 Serpent Spine at maximum stacks. Now, this is a battle pass weapon, and you don't need to get the battle pass to have a good Navia, and you definitely don't need to buy 5 battle passes, but I will say that the Serpent Spine is a great option, and it is the most universal 4-star Claymore in my opinion. Next up, we are getting a free event weapon this patch, and this weapon pairs pretty well with Navia. The weapon is called the Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword, which is an incredible name. You get energy recharge so that you don't need to worry about getting it in your artifacts, and you get an insane amount of attack percent, but only if you've saved enough Melazine, which means you are going to have to do some questing if you want this weapon to reach its maximum potential. Imagine actually having to play the game to be strong. Couldn't it be me? I got Verdict in a single 10 pull. Oh, it's so easy. Oh, it's so easy, bro. Oh my god, the prophecy has been fulfilled. Obviously, other 5-star Claymores like Bacon of the Sea and Wolf's Gravestone are going to be good on Navia. Redhorn can also serve as a pretty good stat stick. But for some more 4-star options, oddly enough, Sacrificial Greatsword, a sword that is useless on everybody else, can actually be decent on Navia. If you get literally 0 energy recharge on your artifacts and all of those substats give you attack and crit, then the energy recharge on Sacrificial can be useful, and getting an extra charge for your elemental skill is pretty neat. Unfortunately, for this thing to be worth it, I feel like you would need at least an R4 sack sword. But if you don't have any of these options, then you can also use Tidal Shadow, Prototype Archaic, or Blackcliff Slasher. But every weapon that I have already talked about would be preferred. Okay, cool. Now that you have your artifacts attached and your weapon equipped, how do you actually play Navia? First, you summon your inner American and rain a barrage of gunfire across the battlefield using your elemental burst. You usually want to start with your elemental burst so that you can start proccing some crystallized reactions, because the more crystals you collect before using your elemental skill, the more damage you do. But your damage stops increasing after 6 crystals, so don't get too carried away. But starting with your burst is usually a good choice, then using an elemental skill followed by 5 to 6 normal attacks, because after around 5 to 6 normal attacks, you usually run out of the Geo infusion that you get from her elemental skill. And it's not really worth normal attacking after that, because you are mainly normal attacking to cause the crystallized reaction to get more damage for your elemental skill. Navia is one of the more unique main DPS units. Because of the way they designed her kit, you can kind of choose how much field time you want to give her, which is a really nice change of pace. Main DPS units are selfish, and they usually require a lot of field time. In most of these teams, all you are really doing with your other units is setting up so that you can use your hyper carry for the next 3 years until it's time to set up your next rotation. But with Navia, it's different. She gets me. Because a lot of her damage comes from her elemental skill, you don't have to follow the exact same setup and rotation every single time. Depending on the enemy that you're fighting or the current situation you are in, you have room to vary your rotations. Her playstyle is pretty simple. You want to stack crystallized reactions, set up your buffs, suck up all of the crystals, and then launch a ridiculously powerful elemental skill. Her having 2 stacks on her elemental skill at Constellation 0 allows her some wiggle room. Sometimes when you are clearing the abyss, there will be this awkward moment where the enemies aren't quite dead, but they are pretty close. You don't want to start another rotation to finish them off, because you won't get enough energy back to start with your burst on the next floor if you do. But since Navia does so much front-loaded damage, she can quickly solo bolo these enemies all by herself, which I actually think is a pretty big plus. Navia allows you a lot of freedom, and right now it's kind of too much freedom. Since Navia's kit is one of the first of its kind, there aren't that many units that pair really well with Navia. The first characters that came to mind to pair with her were characters that already pair well with everyone. So hopefully they release some characters in the future that synergize a little better with Navia. I'm looking at you, Chiori. But for now, here are some of her best team comps. The first team I have for you is double Geo, double Pyro. For the first Geo slot, you're obviously going to be running Navia, and for the second slot, you're going to either be running Zhongli or Albedo. This is probably the first team that everyone thought of. Zhongli and Bennett just make a lot of sense. You can use Bennett to funnel energy into your Zhongli or Albedo can give you Geo Resonance and help you proc more crystallized reactions. Also, both Zhongli and Navia do an insane amount of damage on their own, so this team feels very good to play. In general, I think that Bennett is currently the best support for Navia, so be ready. A lot of these teams are going to have Bennett on them. If you don't have Zhongli, but you still want a reliable shield to keep up the Geo Resonance, you can also run this team with Geo MC, Navia, Layla, and Bennett. This team doesn't feel as smooth to play, and it doesn't do as much damage, but it still works surprisingly well. And even though the Geo Traveler is cheeks, I still love playing Geo MC, so I had to throw at least one team in there that involved them. If you have Farina and are going to be running the Marechaussee artifact set, you can take this double Geo, double Pyro team and just swap out Xiangling for Farina. If you do this, I would recommend running Bennett on a healing bonus circlet. It is a little tougher getting fanfare stacks with Farina because Bennett isn't a team-wide healer. But since you have so much freedom to just swap around on Navia teams, you can actually keep everyone's health up without it feeling too clunky. You can naturally cycle through using everyone's abilities, and if you have a healing bonus circlet on Bennett, that should be enough field time to keep everyone's health above the 50% threshold. Next up is a pretty fun team, Navia Taser. You run double Geo and then Sing Cho and Beidou or Fischl for electrocharge reactions. With this team, it is very easy to stack up crystals from the crystallized reaction, which allows Navia to hit those nice big juicy numbers that we love to see. If you happen to have the characters for it, double Geo, double Hydro is also a solid option. Running Navia, Albedo, Yelan, Sing Cho feels pretty good, and it feels especially good during the current Spiral Abyss where you need to break 1,000 Pyro shields. Using Navia, Noelle, Farina, and Yelan also feels pretty good. In this team specifically, Navia usually gets less field time so that Noelle can on-field for longer and heal the team. It's funny because basically the teams that feel the best currently are going to be Navia plus really good off-field DPS units. Currently, I think that this is just the best way to utilize Navia. But again, I really hope that they release a character in the future that specifically synergizes with Navia. Chiori, I'm begging you. Overall, Navia feels really good to play. She is actually the most fun that I've had with a character ever, and this personally makes me really excited to see what Clarion can do. Everybody buckle in, gun characters in Genshin are the future. Navia is a very good unit. Although she isn't a stupidly busted DPS unit like Neuvillette, I'm a fire in my laser! She is also infinitely more fun to play than Neuvillette, so it balances out. But that will be all for today's guide. Thank you very much for watching, and just remember, you don't have to believe in yourself. Believe in me. Believe in the me that believes in you, and I'll see you in the next video.